On December 8, 2015, Pope Francis opened the Holy Door at St. Peter's in Rome to start the Jubilee Year of Mercy. Pope Francis called for a year of mercy so that all men and women may enjoy God's mercy, so that Christians be messengers or angels of mercy to those in need. He has asked us to do the works of mercy this year. The Pope said that his burning desire for this year of mercy is that the Catholics do the corporal and spiritual works of mercy. A few months later, the Pope met in Rome with his top theologians. Instead of talking about complex theological questions, the Pope spoke on the importance of the works of mercy. Take a look at that meeting.
Pope Francis met with members of the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith. Their leader, Cardinal Mueller, thanked the Pope at the encounter.
Ringraziandola per la sua accoglienza paterna e l'intensa testimonianza di vita figlia.
Pope Francis asked them to use the Jubilee of Mercy to renovate their faith.
Perciò la misericordia costituisce l'architrave che sorregge la vita della Chiesa. La prima verità della Chiesa, infatti, è l'amore di Cristo.
In his speech, Francis shared a story with them about a meeting he had with a large group of Catholics. You can see the crowd here. That day, the Pope talked about mercy, and he asked that crowd to raise their hands if they could name the corporal and spiritual works of mercy. And in that crowd of 7,000 people, only 20 raised their hands. That's why the Pope told those theologians to teach the works of mercy. So we decided to ask people around Boston if they can name the works of mercy.
Would you please tell me your name?
Cardinal Sean.
And what do you do, Cardinal Sean?
I'm the Archbishop of Boston.
And how long have you been a Catholic?
My whole life.
And Cardinal, could you name for me the corporal and spiritual works of mercy?
Well, probably most of them. So the corporal works of mercy are feed the hungry, give drink to the thirsty, clothe the naked, visit the sick, shelter the homeless, bury the dead, welcome the stranger. Okay? And then the spiritual are instruct the ignorant, admonish the sinner, forgive sins, pray for the living and the dead, bear wrongs patiently, and counsel the doubtful. Okay, did we get them all?
Very good. Thank you very much for your time.
Oh, you're quite welcome.
Could you tell me your name, please?
Nate Thomas.
And Nate, how old are you?
19 years old.
And how long have you been a Catholic, Nate?
2 months less than I'm old.
Okay. And what do you study, Nate?
Philosophy.
Nate, could you name the corporal and spiritual works of mercy for me?
Sure. There's feed the hungry, clothe the naked, bury the dead, heal the sick. So there's 7 of each, right? Yeah, that's 4 corporal works of mercy.
All right, thank you, Nate.
I'm Julius Caesar.
And how old are you, Julius Caesar?
I'm 13.
And what school do you go to?
I go to McDevitt Middle School.
Can you name for me any of the corporal works of mercy?
Feed the hungry, clothe the naked, and that's it. That's all I know.
All right, thanks, Julius. Excuse me, can you tell me your name?
My name is Alfred Padilla.
And how old are you, Alfred?
12.
And what school do you go to, Alfred?
John W. McDevitt Middle School.
Can you name for me the corporal works of mercy?
Feeding the hungry, clothing the naked, letting rest the dead people.
Excuse me,
Hi,
could you tell me your name?
Rafaela.
Alicia!
And how old are you girls?
11.
13.
And what school do you go to?
Kennedy.
Stanley, elementary school.
Could you girls name the corporal and spiritual works of mercy for me?
The spiritual is, no, the corporal is visit the sick, visit the imprisoned, ransom captives.
Nope.
Okay.
Bury the dead.
Pray for the living and the dead. Bury the dead. Teach the ignorant. Is that all of them? One more.
Thank you.
So we found out that we had some work to do, and we decided to learn from the best. We decided to learn from St. Francis of Assisi. Here you can see a portrait of him. It comes from a monastery that he visited, called Subiaco. This is what he really looked like. Most of us had heard of St. Francis before, but knew very little about him. Pope Francis, in his letter on the environment, said that we should follow St. Francis because he loved everything that God created. In other words, he was merciful to everyone, to every person, and even every animal. So we tried to learn what influenced him. We cook recipes from Italy, food that he might have eaten, at least before he became a religious brother, before he did so much fasting. Here you can see some of us cooking. We enjoyed life outside and worked in the garden. And we made time to pray each day, before and after studying, praying the rosary, praying at Mass, and praying during adoration. And we learned about his life, especially from the paintings in the church where he is buried in Assisi. You can see the church here. The paintings we looked at are called frescoes, a word that means fresh in Italian, which, because the walls were wet instead of being dry, when they were painted on. An artist named Giotto painted them about 50 years after Francis had died. Some of the frescoes were damaged by an earthquake, but they are still beautiful. We want to show you some of these frescoes, so you can see what mercy looks like.
This fresco shows Francis before he served God. When he was young, he spent his time on having fun and making money. Here we see Francis with some friends in the center of Assisi. Even though he was not serving God, a man who saw Francis coming laid down his cloak for Francis to walk on, the same way they did to Jesus when he entered Jerusalem. The man somehow knew that Francis was going to be great, even if he wasn't doing great things yet. Somehow, like God, the man somehow was on the inside, behind the man who not on the ground. You see two other men asking each other what is happening. By the way, if you go to Assisi today, you can still see the Roman temple and the tower in the middle of the painting.
Francis was a knight who wanted to win battles and be famous. Here you could see him with his horse. One day, while riding, he came upon another knight badly dressed. Francis felt bad for him and gave the knight his golden cloak. For Francis, this was big. He loved clothes. In fact, he was a clothes horse. Francis was beginning to think of the needs of others rather than just himself. The fresco shows how Francis is deciding which path to travel in life, living for the things in the world or seeking the kingdom of heaven. We can see this in the background with the two mountains, the one on the left representing the passing world and the one on the right with the church representing God's kingdom. And we can see what direction Francis is going in.
That same night, while Francis was sleeping, God showed him a palace filled with weapons, but the weapons were laid out as crosses. The painting shows Jesus pointing to the palace. He told Francis that he would receive a great reward for clothing the man, for doing the corporal work of mercy, that the palace representing heaven would be the reward for him and all his knights. He thought the dream meant he would be great as a soldier, but later on he learned he would be great by doing what God wanted.
Francis ended his career as a soldier.
He spent all his time praying and serving the poor. One day he walked by the church of San Damiano. It was old and almost collapsing, but Francis wanted to pray. You can see how the roof was collapsing except in the spot where Francis was praying. He felt at peace looking at the cross of the Lord. Then he heard a voice coming from the crucifix say to him 3 times, "Francis, go and repair my house. You see, it is all falling down." He was terrified, but the message went into his heart. He committed himself to rebuilding the church of San Damiano, which he did along with the other churches near Assisi. But later he told his brothers that God told him to rebuild, not just church buildings, but the whole church on earth. Today you can pray in front of the same cross in the Basilica of St. Clare in Assisi.
Francis' father sold textiles and clothes, and he loved money. Francis inherited this love for nice clothes and money.
But after meeting Jesus, everything changed. One day, Francis gave all the family money to the poor. When his father found out, they fought, and Francis was tied up.
When his father went away on business, his mother helped him escape. When his father found out, he was furious and had been captured and brought back home.
Then the father brought his son in front of the bishop to say in front of everyone that he did not want Francis to be his son.
But when they got in front of the bishop and all the people, it was Francis who gave up being the son, saying he did not need his inheritance or even the clothes that his father gave him.
Francis took off all his clothes in front of everybody and gave them to his father. You can see the father holding the clothes in his arm. He said to his father,
"Until now I called you my father, but from now on I can say without reserve, Our Father who art in heaven. He is all my wealth, and I place all my confidence in him."
The heart of the bishop was moved by the young man's courage. You can see him covering the naked saint with his own cloak. Later on, they would give Francis an old tunic that belonged to one of the bishop's farm workers.
By the way, at the top of the painting, Giotto has painted the hand of God who blesses Francis.
Today the tunic is in the museum of the church in Assisi. It looks like this. You can see it when you go there.
Francis went to Rome to speak with the Pope. The Pope liked what Francis said, but more importantly, he recognized that Francis was the man who was in his dream a few nights before. You can see the Pope sleeping in his bed while in the dream on the left. A little man is holding up a church that is collapsing. It was the Pope's church, St. John Lateran. This led the Pope to be sure that Francis was sent by God. After the dream, Pope Innocent III gave Francis and his brothers the mission of preaching mercy and penance. This was the start of the Franciscan order. You can see the acceptance of the Pope's approval shown in the brothers who humble themselves, kneeling before the Pope, and the tonsure, the hairstyle of a monk, which symbolizes the crown of thorns placed on the suffering Christ.
A city near Assisi called Arezzo was attacked by demons. You can see the power of the demons, shown in how the city on the right was separated from God and his church. At the bottom of the painting, you can also see that there was an earthquake, which is common in the part of the world. Francis and one of his brothers named Sylvester went to free the city. They wanted to set the people free. Sylvester raised his arm and shouted to the demons to leave the city. He cast out the demons while Saint Francis knelt down behind him and strengthened him with his prayer. You can see above the demons fleeing the city and the people who are no longer afraid, coming out of their homes.
Francis went to Egypt as part of the Fifth Crusade. He crossed enemy lines and had a meeting with the Sultan to convert the Sunni Muslim leader to Christianity. Francis is in the center of the fresco. The Sultan is seated on the right in a mosque with Islamic designs. Here we see Francis accepting the challenge of the Sultan to walk through fire without getting harmed, to show that Christ is the true God. To the left, You can see the Muslim clerics who refused to take part in this challenge. Francis did not succeed in converting the Sultan, but the Sultan liked him, which is why Franciscans were given the honor of caring for the Christian sites in the Holy Land today.
Christmas was Francis's favorite holiday. One year he celebrated Christmas just like it happened in Bethlehem. The manger of a barn was prepared with hay, an ox, and an ass, which you can see in the bottom right part of the painting. The people came out at midnight with candles. Francis preached, and the priest celebrated the Mass over the manger. Everyone was moved, remembering what it meant that God became a child. One man even saw a child in the manger, showing that the Christ child had returned to their hearts.
One day, Francis got sick while traveling with a few of the brothers. They met a poor man with a donkey, who let Francis be carried by the animal. The man was in need of water. Francis got off the donkey and began to pray for the man. You can see the result of his prayer. Water started flowing from a rock, allowing the man to quench his thirst. This miracle taught us that a corporal work of mercy, such as giving drink to the thirsty, can be done by many ways, most especially by prayer. One day he went to the town of Bevagana. He saw a flock of all different kinds of birds. He ran towards them, and they did not fly away. As he got near to them, he greeted them and begged them to listen to his preaching. This is what he said to them.
My brother birds, you should praise your Creator very much and always love Him. He gave you feathers to clothe you and wings so you can fly, and whatever else is necessary for you. God made you noble among His creatures and gave you a home in the purity of the air. Though you neither sow nor reap, He nevertheless protects and governs you without leaving you with a care in the world.
The birds rejoice, lifting their necks and flapping their wings. As you can see in the painting, Francis finished by blessing them as you can see.
One day Francis was invited to eat at the house of a noble man. Francis asked God to bless his host. You can see Francis seated in the place of honor at table. The knight made his confession, and shortly after died even before the meal was finished. Francis has performed a work of mercy, for none of us knows the day or hour.
One day near September 14th, the feast day of the Exaltation of the Holy Cross, Francis prayed on the slope of Mount Alverna. He had just begun a 40-day fast for the feast day of St. Michael the Archangel. He was in deep prayer when suddenly he saw the Christ in form of an angel. You can see in the upper right part of the painting, St. Francis felt this mix of heavenly joy and earthly pain. When the angel departed, Francis felt and saw that the wounds of Jesus were now on his body. He had to walk with special shoes because of the nail openings. He lived this way for the last 2 years of his life. Francis was the first person to receive the stigmata, the nail markings and wounds of Jesus, showing that he was so close to Jesus, that he even shared his suffering.
Francis died at the Church of Our Lady of the Angels on October 3rd, 1226, at the age of 44. At the bottom of the fresco, you can see his brothers surrounding him with prayer and mourning his death above them. The bishop and priest lift the prayers to heaven, while at the top you can see angels guiding Francis up to heaven. If you look even closely, you can see that Francis still had the stigmata at his death. If you look even closer, you can see a hidden demon in the clouds. This was only discovered recently. Take a look at this video, which lets you see it better.
Profile of a demon was uncovered last week in one of the frescoes in the Basilica of St. Francis in the Italian city of Assisi. Until now, the figure has gone unnoticed for 8 centuries. The historian Chiara Frugoni made the discovery. It comes from a scene in the series on the life of St. Francis, painted by Giotto in the late 13th century. It's the scene of the death of St. Francis and symbolizes the acquittal of his soul and his arrival in heaven. The Italian painter drew a black devil with 2 horns emerging from the clouds. Some have called it an artistic intrusion on the scene, but the historian Frugoni explains that in medieval times it was believed that demons lived in the sky and delayed the advancement of souls. Some friars of the convent have noted the importance of this discovery for catechesis. According to them, the artist intended to draw evil away from his life.
This painting shows a scene when Francis, on the day of his death, helped a sick brother to get to heaven. When the dying monk saw Francis, he said, "Brother Francis, wait for me. I'm coming with you." It was the work of mercy of comforting the sorrowful.
The people mourned the death of the holy man Francis, yet they were consoled by their faith in the resurrection. A doctor came to confirm that Francis really did have wounds of Jesus on his body. The next fresco shows the funeral procession stopping at the monastery of his friend Claire and her sisters, so they could say goodbye. While this fresco shows the canonization ceremony, which took place 2 years after Francis's death. Pope Gregory IX came from Rome to officially recognize that Francis was a saint. This painting shows the Pope listening to the Franciscan brothers list all the miracles performed after Francis's death.
The frescoes you have seen so far only show you some of the works of mercy that Francis did during his life. But Francis showed mercy even after he died. Take a look at these scenes after his death.
After the canonization of Francis, Pope Gregory started to doubt whether the stigmata was real. You can see Francis appearing to the Pope in a dream. He asked the Pope for an empty cup. He filled the cup with blood that came from his wounded side, performing the work of mercy, that is, counseling the doubtful.
After his death, Francis visited a woman who had died. He restored her to life. You can see the woman surrounded by her family and the priest. The woman went to confession and then died again peacefully. This confused the devil because Francis had performed the work of mercy to correct the sinner.
Here we see Saint Francis coming from heaven to visit a prisoner. The man denied believing in Jesus, and so, because people were serious back then about believing in God, the man was put in prison. The man repented and performed a fast on the night before Francis's feast day. Francis visited the man and helped him get released, performing the works of mercy of visiting prisoners and bearing wrongs patiently.
Learning about Francis and how he was so merciful inspired us not to just learn the works of mercy, but to do them. So we tried to do the works of mercy. Last fall, we harvested vegetables from our garden and donated them to the local homeless shelter, and fed the birds who were hungry all winter. We prayed for the sick and wrote cards to cheer them up. Father Michael went to see a woman who was dying. He took one of our cards and read it to her just before she died. He told us it was a happy death. We collected clothing for children here in Waltham and sent them to Guatemala. The St. Vincent de Paul Society told us a lot of families needed our clothing. And we prayed for the living and the dead. And we try to be merciful like Francis. We have learned to be grateful for what God has given us, and to sing as a sign of joy and happiness. The after-school program finishes this week, but the Year of Mercy continues until November. So we will return in September to keep learning the works of mercy and hopefully be merciful for the rest of our lives. Because God is so merciful with us, because the church is a place of mercy, because we have enjoyed mercy all year, coming here every day for free, welcoming us here so we aren't home alone, feeding us, being patient with us, giving us tutors and volunteers when we do our homework, and helping us to read, and correcting us when we do something wrong, encouraging us when we are scared or sad, praying for us all the time, and letting us stay close to God. For Jesus said, "Let the children come to me."
Can you name the corporal and spiritual works of mercy, Angie?
I don't know.
Try.
Okay. Feed the hungry, give drink to the thirsty, clothe the naked, visit the sick, welcome the stranger, visit the imprisoned, bury the dead.
And what about the spiritual works of mercy?
Instruct the ignorant, forgive sinners, bear wrongs patiently, counsel the doubtful, comfort the sorrowful, correct the sins, and pray for the living and the dead.
Can you tell me your name?
Jose.
Jose, can you name the corporal and spiritual works of mercy for me?
Yes.
Go ahead, whenever you're ready.
Feed the hungry, give drink to the thirsty, clothe the naked, visit the sick, welcome the stranger, visit the imprisoned, bury the dead, instruct the ignorant, forgive the sins, bear wrongs patiently, console the doubtful, comfort the sorrowful, correct the sinner, and pray for the living and the dead.
Could you tell me your name, please?
Leslie.
And how old are you, Leslie?
10.
And what school do you go to?
Clinton.
And could you name the corporal works of mercy for me?
Again. Feed the hungry, give drink to the thirsty, clothe the naked, visit the sick, visit the prison, welcome the stranger, and bury the dead.
Thank you.